Hello, and welcome to WINNOW, a couple's close reading of the Iliad and Odyssey. I'm Owen Gemmer.
I'm Isabella Gemmer. We are married and we love to read books together.
Right now, we are reading Homer's Iliad, and this podcast is journeying through the entirety of the Iliad. We'll move on to the Odyssey, going book by book, and we are on book 3 right now.
Yep, book 3 of the Iliad. I'm very excited to talk about this one. This is like when the action really ramps up.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I just got really excited reading it.
Yeah, it's good. Because, there's a lot of tension that builds in the first couple of books with like lots of arguments, but now we get fights.
Now we get to see the fighting.
Yeah. But still not fully yet. And I think that's what we'll get into, is that it doesn't actually sort of like fully pop off in the way maybe we were expecting.
Yeah. But the energy's great.
Yes.
The energy is definitely like building in the book. You know?
So we will do our little summary game that we've been doing every episode where we go sentence by sentence back and forth, sort of completing each other's thoughts to sort of summarize the entirety of the book in a short amount of time. You want to start?
Yeah. We're trying to get faster and faster at it as well. So it will take up less and less, of the beginning of the episode. So we can really...
This one's also a short book, so...
Yeah. Book 3 is pretty short, actually. Okay. So book 3 begins with... some descriptions of both the Greeks and the Trojans marching towards one another.
Yep. There's a lot of descriptions of, again, like how loud and chaotic and energetic it is. Because if you remember the last book, the Greeks were leaving like, we're going to go, today's the day we're going to like destroy the city. So they are all like crazy hype. Mm-hmm.
And our attention gets drawn to a new-ish character on the Trojan side, Paris. Paris is the guy who took Helen from Menelaus, and he sort of steps out from the crowd.
But he's doing so courageously, but as soon as he sees how big the Greek army is and how powerful they are, he gets kind of scared, and he runs back to his big brother, Hector.
Hector, we also get introduced to Hector, another one of our Trojan guys. And Hector essentially like berates Paris. He's like, you are such a coward. I can't believe that I have to endure being on the same team with you.
And in their conversation, Hector kind of bullies Paris a little bit into proposing a duel to end the war.
Mm-hmm. And Paris is, he's convinced. He's like, yeah, I should challenge Menelaus to a duel.
So he goes out and he offers this challenge that basically Menelaus and I will fight, and whoever kills the other will get to take Helen and all of her riches, and we'll stop fighting. And so the war will stop after today because one of us will win, one of us will die, and then they'll get Helen and we can all go home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hector is the one who goes out and proposes it in Paris's stead, actually, because Hector is like the real man here.
Yeah, true.
And then Agamemnon is like, okay, good idea. Menelaus is like, good idea. But they say, like, go get Priam, who is king of the Trojans. We'll get the king to swear to the duel, because his word is worth way more than Paris's, essentially.
Yeah. So in the meantime, then we switch POVs. We go back to Troy, to sort of up on the walls, where Priam is there, the king, with Helen. And Priam kind of asks Helen, like, hey, you used to live with all these people. Who's who out there? Which of these kind of great soldiers are the ones we've heard these tales of?
Mm-hmm. And Helen points out Agamemnon, Menelaus, Odysseus, and Ajax.
Yep.
Pretty much. And Priam is quite impressed. He's like, oh yeah, these are very big, strong guys.
Yeah. Then he goes out and he does the thing. He swears the thing. They formally kind of like agree to the terms of this duel. They offer some sacrifices, kill some sheep, as you do. And the terms are set. Everybody's agreed.
The duel begins. Paris gets to strike first. They have sort of like a drawing lots system. I don't understand 100% how it works, but Paris gets to strike first, and it's not very impressive. And then Menelaus just continues to like absolutely obliterate. Yeah, totally. He's just, it's like not even a fight.
And it's also very quick.
Very quick.
It's not super detailed.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a bit. But
Menelaus he throws his spear far away when it misses Paris. Then he gets out his sword. He tries to, like, he hits Paris's helmet, but his sword shatters. And then he's like, I don't have any weapons now. So he just grabs Paris by the helmet and starts to drag him. And Paris almost chokes out because there's like a strap under that holds his helmet on. He almost chokes out because the strap is like pressing on his throat. And then Aphrodite shows up.
So she cuts the strap on Paris's helmet so that it falls off. Menelaus is left just holding the helmet. And Paris is now on the ground, sort of not being dragged anymore. He's still injured and scared and losing the fight, but he's at least not getting dragged by his head to the middle of the Greek army.
Paris is like favored by Aphrodite because Paris is like really good looking, apparently. And so Aphrodite casts a thick fog over the fight scene and like around everybody, so no one can see anything. And then she whisks Paris back to his bedroom, essentially. Right,
because Menelaus, after the helmet breaks, is like going back to grab him again. He's like, well, I can't drag him by the head, so I'll just like pick him up and do that. But right, that's when he sort of like reaches into the fog, and then Paris just isn't there.
Yeah. So Paris is safe and sound back in his bedroom in Troy. And then Aphrodite goes to Helen and tells Helen, like, you should go hang out with Paris now.
Yeah. And Helen isn't too happy about this. She kind of lays into Aphrodite of like, if you love Paris so much that you saved him, like, why didn't you go marry him yourself? She clearly is not a fan of her own husband.
Yeah. And her whole situation. She's like not happy at all. Aphrodite basically responds with like, if you don't do what I say, so far I've protected you and you've been in my favor. But if you don't do what I say, then someone's going to kill you. One of these guys is going to get their hands on you and kill you. So
she relents. She goes to spend some time with her husband, but she does call him a coward and kind of insult him before, doing what Aphrodite has asked.
And then it cuts back to where the duel was happening. Menelaus is like running around in the fog. He's like, I can't find him. But obviously I won. And Agamemnon is like, yes, obviously you won. So Agamemnon basically declares the duel's over. Obviously Menelaus won. Give us Helen, give us our treasure, and bing bada boom. This has been taken care of.
Yep.
And that's how it ends.
Yeah. The whole book ends right there. It's over.
So, yeah. Yeah, you would think.
Right.
If you didn't know there was more, you'd be like, oh, okay, it's obviously over.
Right. But obviously, we don't get this in book 3, but the length of what we have left implies that the Trojans are not going to cooperate as easily as Agamemnon might like them to. So yeah, to kind of step into our kind of big picture analysis review of kind of main ideas, I think it's important that we introduce and talk a little bit about all the new characters. We've learned a lot about the different kind of people on the Greek side and sort of who they are, what their whole deal is, and now we sort of get a formal, like, up close and personal introduction to some of the really relevant players on the Trojan side. So do you want to start with Hector?
We don't know too much about Hector yet, though.
Right.
We just know that he's one of the Trojan leaders, and we know that he really doesn't like Paris.
We also do, I believe at this point, know that he and Paris are brothers. They are both sons of Priam, so they are princes of Troy. Hector...
They don't act like brothers.
Right.
So.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah. So Hector will become kind of the main Trojan. So this is our first kind of introduction to him, where he's basically like really harsh big brother to Paris, calling him a coward, sort of pretty fed up with this whole war. one thing I do find interesting about that, his reaction to Paris is actually fairly similar to Achilles. We will have to, as we read, see Achilles and Hector as foils for one another.
Yeah.
That's a fancy literary term for characters who are kind of like same but different, where they have some similarities, but then other differences between them. And so they're meant to kind of be shown in contrast to one another. So, right. Hector's reaction to Paris is basically like, you started this war. I'm kind of sick and tired of being caught up in this war. That's your fault for taking Helen. I didn't ask to be a part of this. In the exact same way that Achilles was telling Agamemnon, like, hey, like, I didn't ask to be a part of this war. Like, it's not my deal. It's not my, all of this.
And then obviously, as we get more information about, what drives Hector to continue to be a part of the battles, we get to compare Achilles versus Hector, like their different motivations.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they both kind of have the same reason for they're both the best warrior in their army, and they're both kind of like, I don't really want to be here.
Yeah.
But I'm the best, so I kind of have to be here.
And we'll get more about that as things continue. There's also an interesting parallel between, you've got two sets of brothers, right? You have Hector and Paris versus Agamemnon and Menelaus.
That's a good point too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, right, in the Trojan side, Paris and Hector, they are not like ride or dies for one another in the same way that Agamemnon and Menelaus are, right? Like Menelaus had his wife stolen, and Agamemnon, his brother, is like, yeah, we're going to war for you. Like, I'm going to do all of this to help my little brother out with his woman problems. Well, then obviously this transitions well into talking about Paris himself. He's kind of the main character of this whole book. Interestingly though, like, this is really his moment to shine in the whole book. He's present for the rest of it, but not in the same way he is now. So this is the Paris book.
This is his moment.
I'll note that some translators in older versions refer to him as Alexandrus. And so just if you're listening or reading different versions, Paris, Alexandrus, same person.
I wanted to read like the first introduction we get of Paris, like from the narrator's perspective, because I think it's just really, it's like kind of absurd. It's giving like Zoolander. I'll just read it. As they drew near each other, the fighter at the forefront of the Trojans was godlike Paris Alexander, wearing a cloak of panther skin draped round his shoulders. He held a curving bow and sword and brandished 2 spears, both tipped with bronze. He stood in front and summoned all the bravest of the Greeks to fight him hand to hand in deadly combat. So like at first he's really confident, and then he sees Menelaus, and he sees like basically how menacing Menelaus is, and then he draws back. And this Homeric simile is also really good. I just got to read it. As in the valleys of a mountainside, when someone sees a snake and startles back, their body trembles and their cheeks turn pale, and off they run. So godlike Paris, frightened of Menelaus, son of Atreus, drew back among the throng of Trojan fighters.
Yeah, that's good.
I think my favorite part is like, he's wearing like panther skin.
Yeah.
Which that's not been a thing anyone else has done so far.
Yeah.
Like only him.
This is obviously like a modern imposition, but like I picture him in like a leopard print, like trying like way too hard to be cool.
Yeah. It says panther, but like I think I'm picturing leopard print.
Yeah.
And I'm picturing like, you know how where like they have the skin, but sort of the skull of the animal is still attached.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I'm picturing like the panther's skull like on top of his head, right? Like a crown, and then like it flows down like around his shoulders.
Yeah.
That's what I'm picturing.
Yeah.
Like Lion King type.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think the initial description of him being very sort of like attractive and menacing and sort of courageous is in stark contrast to his cowardly sort of fear of Menelaus that then Hector berates him for pretty immediately, like right off the bat. So do you want to read that passage as well, when he sort of retreats and Hector sees him?
The way that Hector chastises him.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's just a few lines. Yeah. Around Greek line 38, Hector says to Paris, "Pathetic Paris, womanizer, cheat. You are the very best at looking pretty. Oh, how I wish that you had never lived or died unmarried. That would be far better than life as such an object of contempt.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. And so this gets us into our first little Greek time segment.
Little Greek time. Pew, 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 pew.
In the Greek, the word that Wilson translates as womanizer is gunaimanes, which is a compound word. The first half, gunai, is related to the word for woman. So gynecology, gune, is the Greek root for woman. And then manes is related to the verb mainomai, which means to become mad or to become crazy. If you remember, back in book 1, we talked about how the whole book opens with the noun manus, which is rage, that describes Achilles, but this is the verb form of that. And so it is literally someone who is like mad for women.
Yeah. And it's where we get mania from.
Right.
Which has like a more...
Or maniac as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we get that more like crazy,
right.
Implications.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a good thing. Like it's very clear.
It's like possessed.
Right.
Yeah.
By lust and desire for women and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think womanizer is a good, I think would be is a good translation of that word. And it's obviously meant to be a insult.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that it gets that across.
Yeah. Yeah. And so obviously now that's a good segue as well to talk about Helen, because we've heard about her obviously as the cause of this war, but obviously she herself didn't do anything, right? Like her existence and the sort of theft of her from Menelaus caused it, but like she herself is a victim of this, not like she's both the cause and the victim of the war. And so, yeah, what do you think about our first impressions of Helen through this chapter?
Yeah, well, she's been just a name up until this point. And I think it's pretty clear that she's like she's there against her will. She's not there willingly.
Yeah. This version, yeah. Again, I think
in this version,
different versions of the story have different levels of how much Paris seduced her and she ran away from Menelaus versus kidnapped. And this one, seems to lean more towards she hates Paris and doesn't want to be here.
It could have been that maybe initially she went willingly. I don't know. But at this point, she's definitely been like soured to the point where she's like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah. And yet I think she is still regal and graceful and kind, right? Like when Priam asks her to sort of point out all of the different Greek people, she is both descriptive, she's kind, she's praiseworthy. She's like, she like has fond memories of all these different people that she's pointing out and has very nice things to say about all the Greeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of ties into like our little introduction of Priam. I really like actually Helen and Priam's interaction. That type of relationship with like a younger woman and an older man, it can go like creepy kind of, but I think that like when it's done well, like it is in this book, like it's like kind of super sweet. And like Priam even like says to her, like, I don't blame you for anything that's happened here, because we all blame Paris.
Right.
We all hate Paris. Like we know this is not your fault. It's kind of what he says. And yeah, I just kind of like that. Like they're just having like a kind of a cute interaction together.
Yeah. One interesting aspect of that whole conversation though is the fact that this is Priam's supposedly first time ever seeing any of these people. Like this war has been happening for 9 years. And Priam doesn't know what Agamemnon looks like. And I find that really interesting because, obviously, like, there weren't pictures or, like, videos of these people going around. But you would have thought that, like, in 9 years of fighting. But I think, I'm absolutely no expert on sort of Bronze Age warfare in general or the specific sort of Trojan War sort of lore or all of that. But my impression is that for the most part, most of the fighting up till now has been the Greeks sort of conquering and attacking sort of the outlying villages and other towns and cities. Because when they're fighting over Briseis and Chryses and all that, like those people weren't from Troy proper. They were from some other village that they had just conquered and sort of won. And so there's a decent chance that I think this might actually be the first time the Greeks have actually like approached the walls of Troy itself
Yeah.
this whole time.
Yeah. It's also interesting because Priam is from far away. He's actually quite impressed by Agamemnon.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, who's that? Very big, strong, leader-looking man.
Yeah.
And it's actually really interesting because up to that point, that's not really how I've pictured him.
Right.
Like when you get to know him from the Greek side, it's not really what I've been seeing. But from Priam's perspective, you know, he's a very strong-looking leader.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
So this interaction is happening. Priam is learning all of this from Helen, who is very, again, sort of calmly explaining things. But there's an interesting passage when Helen is describing Agamemnon that I think reveals some interesting things about her character as well. Do you want to read sort of that description?
This is around Greek line like 179. I'll start a little bit before that. So Helen is describing Agamemnon. He is a skillful leader and a strong spear fighter, and he was once my kinsman through his brother, the former husband of my dog-faced self, if any of these things took place at all.
Yeah. So the Lattimore also translates that phrase dog-faced self even more harshly. This is what kind of jumped out at me. I was checking sort of the Lattimore version. He was a good king and a strong spear fighter, once my kinsman, slut that I am. So when I read that, I was like, slut that I am. I was like, whoa, that's really harsh. And the Wilson, does it as, what is it? Dog-faced or dog-eyed?
Dog-faced self.
Dog-faced. Right. So the Greek here, Greek time.
Greek time. Pew, 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 pew.
So the Greek here is kunopidos, which is another compound word related to the word for dog and the word for your eyes. So kun and ops. So it's dog-eyed, quite literally. But if you look it up in various dictionaries, so this is Cunliffe's Greek lexicon of the Homeric dialect that's specifically for sort of Homeric Greek. He says that this word is, again, literally dog-eyed, but used to mean lost to all sense of shame or decency, shameless, reckless, outrageous. So it kind of like that idea of shamelessness is, I think, where then, Lattimore is getting that term of slut. But it's not always related to sexual conquest either. Because I looked up other places in both the Iliad and the Odyssey where this word is used, and it's used interestingly in a couple places. So Helen uses it to describe herself twice here and then once in the Odyssey, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Back in book 1 of the Iliad, Achilles uses it to describe Agamemnon. When Agamemnon is refusing to give up his prize, Chryseis, to give back to her father, Achilles calls him shameless. And then it is also used by Agamemnon in the Odyssey. You'll probably really get a kick out of this. Do you remember Agamemnon coming up in the Odyssey at all? In book 11, which factored pretty heavily into your senior thesis.
Oh, when he goes to the underworld?
Yeah.
Oh, and he bumps into Agamemnon in the underworld?
Yes. So, in the Odyssey, we'll talk about this. Odysseus goes to the underworld. He talks to a bunch of these characters who have since died, and they give their backstory. And we, again, or the listeners know that Agamemnon died. And so can you guess who Agamemnon calls shameless or a slut?
His wife?
His own wife, yeah. So Agamemnon then uses this to describe Clytemnestra, his own wife, who killed him along with the help of Aegisthus, her new lover, when he returns home. And so, this word is often used to denote sort of like sexual promiscuity. But I think the interesting example of Achilles using it to describe Agamemnon implies it's not always simply out of that, but this idea of like shamelessness. I think the more interesting part to talk about is why Helen uses this to describe herself.
Yeah.
How do you read it? I'm curious.
I don't know. I wonder if she's kind of thinking of herself in the past and almost thinking sometimes the person who you were in the past can start to feel like a different person. And so maybe she's talking about herself and being like, that girl was crazy. She made some mistakes. something like that, maybe.
Interesting, yeah. That's an interesting take. I read it, and mine is, again, biased. So in Cunliffe's sort of glossing of this, he has a sort of a note that this use and the other use in the Odyssey where Helen uses it to describe herself, he says in self-deprecation. So at least Cunliffe reads this less in that way of like self-criticism, but more kind of like almost making fun of the fact that everybody blames her for this war because she's a slut. And she's like, oh yeah, like I'm such a slut and I caused this whole war. Like she doesn't believe it about herself, but she knows that's what other people perceive her as. And so I think at least Cunliffe, and I tend to like that reading more, is that she's kind of like making fun of how obviously oversimplified everybody else's explanation of the war is. Like, well, if Helen weren't such a shameless slut, like this whole war wouldn't happen. And she's like, yeah, totally, it's my fault. Like back when I was a dumb whore, you know, like I think she's being sarcastic and self-deprecating in order to point out how ridiculous all of this is.
I wonder if she uses it also in conversation with Priam because she feels comfortable in conversation with him. I wonder if she feels like, because when they start their conversation, he opens with how, I don't blame you for any of this.
Yeah.
And then she kind of brings back that, because maybe it's like a joke between them in a sense. Like they're both laughing at it. Like, haha, yeah, it's totally your fault. It's not. It's Paris's fault.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Because the other moment she uses it in the Odyssey is early on when Telemachus back home is looking for Odysseus. He goes to like visit a bunch of the other Greeks. He's like, hey, have you seen my dad? And he goes to visit Menelaus. And obviously the Greeks won the war. So Helen is back with Menelaus. So Helen is there talking with Menelaus and Telemachus. And she uses this again to say like, oh yeah, back when we were in Troy, because I was such a shameless person or slut, however the different versions translate it. So in that same moment, she's talking to Telemachus, who she doesn't really know and is kind of obviously non-threatening and kind of has this more loose. She's not in any danger by saying this. Yeah.
So it kind of implies like a funny moment of sarcasm when she's in a conversation that she feels comfortable in.
Yeah.
Also, a little thing we can tack on to this is that Emily Wilson, in her translation of the Odyssey, has a little note about this in her translator's note, which I think will be really interesting to listeners.
I was reading her translation's note for the Odyssey for an essay I was writing for my graduate school program, and it stuck out to me. So this is, again, note that Emily Wilson translated the Odyssey first. So her translator's note for the Odyssey was written before the Iliad, even though chronologically they kind of come afterwards. But the paragraph begins, I try to avoid importing contemporary types of sexism into this ancient poem, instead shining a clear light on the particular forms of sexism and patriarchy that do exist in the text, which are only partly familiar from our world. So she gives some other examples in the Odyssey of different sexist language. But then, so she says, many contemporary translators render Helen's dog face as if it were equivalent to shameless Helen or Helen the bitch. I think here she's implying like Lattimore's translation of translating it like slut. Like a lot of people imbue a lot of sexism into that term. I have kept the metaphor hounded and have also made sure that my Helen, like that of the original, refrains from blaming herself for what men have done in her name. So obviously this is referring to Helen in the Odyssey, who's a much smaller role than Helen in the Iliad. But even there, she's like really keenly aware of trying to use her translation to not imbue more sexism than is already there that many other translators might have imbued into their versions. So let's get to the duel, because this was so exciting.
I remember when we read book 1, we were like talking about Agamemnon and Achilles' battle of words. It's interesting that didn't devolve into a duel situation when duels obviously kind of are a thing.
Right.
So so we get a duel.
Yeah. So you want to talk about it like practically, what narrative purpose does it seem to serve in this moment? Do you have thoughts on that?
I think it just introduces Paris. I think it introduces Paris in a really very specific way. And I think that's kind of the narrative purpose. But you seem to have more thoughts on the duel than me, so go for it.
Yeah, well, I think from a narrative perspective, the other interesting thing that it does is it really shifts the energy again. because like at the beginning of the book, like we were talking about, there's this like huge rush, right? The end of book 2, the Greeks are like, we're going to do it. Like we're going to sack Troy. And now it pauses. There's actually not a giant bloodbath, a giant fight that we might have been expecting. It actually slows down again. Obviously there's going to be a fight. And so there's the tension that surrounds that. But I think the tension between a one-on-one duel and the tension between like two armies sort of clashing is a very different kind of tension. So that shift is really interesting, because I also find it, important that if the duel works out as intended, which we know it doesn't, it does end the war. And I wonder how much some of the Greeks actually wouldn't be fans of this, right? Because it seems like many of the Greeks are in this for their own glory, for their own pillaging, for the prizes that they will get. And so if you're, I don't know, Odysseus or Ajax or these other sort of Greek warriors who are joining this fight, you don't have any personal stakes in it, but you know that you will sort of, by conquering Troy, become a legend. And if the war ends because Menelaus just killed Paris there and we all went home, like there's kind of a letdown of that. Like there's part of me, like if I'm putting myself in Odysseus or Ajax's shoes, like there's part of me that's like, no, I don't want this. Like we're going to go destroy the whole city. You mean we don't get to go sack the city?
Yeah. I think that's why there is a stipulation. Agamemnon makes sure that not only if Menelaus wins the duel, not only do they get Helen back, but they get treasure.
Yes. All the riches that Helen brings with her.
Yeah, they get treasure.
Yeah.
And I think that if that wasn't a part of it, then I think a lot of the guys would have been upset.
Right.
Yeah, but it's definitely, part of it.
Yeah, because again, like it further shows the contrast between kind of like the masses and the elite, where like this is a conflict by the elite that is fought primarily by the masses. And in this case, it's actually the elites kind of like, we're going to work this out ourselves. And it really, again, shifts it away from the swarms, right? Like there was so much imagery of the whole army as this like swarm all moving as one. But now they're not moving as one. They're just like a few of us isolated are sort of working this out ourselves. And obviously that's good because it saves lives on both sides. But it's bad, again, not bad, bad's not the right, but it's just different in terms of how it shifts, again, the momentum of the fighting.
Yeah. And the audience listening would be like, oh, we don't get fighting yet.
Right. Yeah.
But it just serves to like draw out the anticipation even more.
Yeah. And so obviously the other thing I was thinking about outside of the Iliad is I just think the archetype of the sort of duel between two champions to sort of end the war once and for all is so good. Like I just like, as I was reading it, I just kept thinking of so many other examples of like really, really great stories that have the same thing. So we'll see if I made a list. And I actually, while Bella was reading, I was like back on YouTube, like watching movie versions of these fights. And so the main one that comes to mind is David and Goliath, right? Like David and Goliath in the Bible is the archetypal kind of example of this, of like, send me your champion and we will sort of end this war once and for all. Yep. One that came to mind is in Prince Caspian, the fight between Peter and King Miraz. Another one that came to mind was the Mountain and Oberyn Martell in Game of Thrones, where they are fighting on behalf of Tyrion and I don't remember.
Is it Cersei?
Cersei,
maybe?
Yeah.
I don't forget too. Yeah.
But basically, that big fight.
Yeah.
And then obviously in Dune, there's Paul Atreides and Feyd-Rautha fighting. Like there's so many of these good like one-on-one duels where like the winner takes all. And
yeah, definitely.
But it was really...
I just have to add, there's also a great duel in book 2 of Stormlight Archive.
One of these to like where the stakes are, the winner walks away with the whole war and the war ends. Because I think this kind of duel is different than just sort of like a one-on-one duel within a bigger war. Like this is, I feel like this archetype is different where the terms are explicit. Like this will be the only duel that happens and then the war will end as a result of it.
Yeah. The stakes are still high though.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know yet.
So as I was thinking about this archetype and rewatching clips, just so you know, I rewatched the VeggieTales version of the David and Goliath fight. That was the one in my head. I think it's interesting that there are two kind of patterns that emerge. One is that almost all of these take place between a pretty boy and some big kind of brutish person. So, right, obviously David and Goliath. David is young. He's a shepherd. He's not a soldier. And then Goliath is a giant. In Game of Thrones, right? Like Pedro Pascal is Oberyn Martell, like really kind of like suave and all that. And then the mountain is the mountain. Like that's his name. He's just like big hulking brute. Then you get Peter in Prince Caspian, who's, you know, attractive. And then King Miraz is an older guy who's kind of just more kind of like, and then obviously you get the pretty boy Timothy Chalamet as Paul Atreides versus creepy Austin Butler as Phaedra.
Yeah.
And
that's more like pretty boy versus crazy guy.
Yeah. The other just fun fact, I rewatched this scene in the Troy movie from 2004. That's kind of it's a semi-okay, pretty good adaptation of the Iliad as a movie. But Paris is played by Orlando Bloom.
Yeah.
Obviously, like hottie. And then Menelaus is played by the person who plays Mad-Eye Moody.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And so that archetype then still stays there. But the other pattern I think that emerges is in these duels, the duel to end all wars, they almost never end straight up. It's almost never just a clean ending as people would expect, where one beats the other and then we all walk away, right? Obviously, David and Goliath ends the war, but it's sort of non-traditional in that David shouldn't have won. The VeggieTales version, it's Junior the Asparagus who plays David, and the slingshot, he like, because he's an asparagus, he has a pointy head and he swings the top of his head with the slingshot on it. Like, Anyway, in the Game of Thrones version, Oberyn knocks down the mountain and basically has him pinned, but doesn't do the finishing blow because he is so sort of desirous for revenge for the mountain having raped and killed his sister, and he wants the mountain to admit that he did this, and so he's taunting him, and like he gets him on the ground and is taunting him, doesn't kill him, and then that leaves an opening where then the mountain sort of like recovers and knocks him down and crushes his skull. I was trying to think about why that is, and I think obviously it's because of that tension, right? Like this sort of duel builds so much good tension, but if it actually works out where it's just a straight up fight and one person wins and then the war's over, that absolutely kills the tension, right? Like it would be such a buildup to then be an immediate letdown. And so there has to be some twist. If you remember too in Prince Caspian, right? Peter injures Miraz. He's like on the ground. Peter's about to do the killing blow, but he's like, your life is not mine to take. He gives the sword to Prince Caspian because Prince Caspian's the one with the real beef. Prince Caspian then is about to kill him, decides to be merciful, stabs the sword into the ground. They all walk away. And then it's King Miraz's second in command who then stabs King Miraz like in the chest and then blames it. Like, oh, they killed him. They were sneaky, as an excuse to continue the war. And the other thing that's interesting in the Troy movie, one of the biggest derivations from the book is the way this fight plays out, where Menelaus is very clearly beating Paris. Paris is cowardly. He crawls back to Hector, who's standing nearby, and Paris is basically at Hector's knees, and Menelaus is taunting him, like, come fight me like a man, like you're such a coward, like stand up and die like a man and all that. And Paris just refuses to. He's like absolutely pathetic. And so Menelaus just gets pissed. Menelaus goes to basically kill Paris, who's just like on his knees at Hector's feet, and then Hector defends Paris and kills Menelaus in that moment. Because I think, if I remember correctly, in that version, Hector and Paris don't have beef in the same way they do in the book. They're much more kind of friendly brothers. The result is the same. The war continues.
Yeah, the only time it really ends in a one character's clean death is like if that's the end of the book or the movie.
Right. Which is the case in Dune, right?
Yes.
Like in that one, it is straight up where Paul just kills Phaedra.
Yeah.
Because that was not at the beginning of the battle. It was at the end. It was kind of the final hurdle.
Or in the middle.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe we should transition to our oblique angle.
Yeah. We got an alternate sort of path in. That's what I think is probably a lesser known or lesser talked about moment from this chapter that we think, again, further elucidates these kind of bigger ideas. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about this. There are many similes throughout this. Again,
Yes.
Homeric similes are well known as poetic devices. Similes in general are great poetic devices, but Homer is very elaborate with his. And very often, again, you can find a lot of interesting parallels between what's happening in a simile versus what's happening both not only just in that chapter or that section, but in the book as a whole. And so you found one that we both agreed is really, I think, provocative.
Yeah, I'm going to read a Homeric simile from the beginning of book 3 right now. The book starts off with just like a series of beautiful similes that are all great. But this one in particular.
They're all varying levels of describing, again, the marching that's happening of the Greeks and the Trojans and the armies sort of coming together.
Yeah, the Greeks and the Trojans marching towards one another. As on the peaks of some high mountain top, the south wind, notice, pours a fog so thick that nobody can see beyond a stone's throw. Unwelcome to the shepherds, but for the thieves, better than night. So rose the cloud of dust beneath their feet. They hurtled at such speed across the plain. And then, as they draw near to each other. And so basically, the dust that all the marching troops make as they march with their feet creates a dust cloud so thick that it's like this famous fog that pours off of this high mountain top. But the interesting part is this fog or this dust cloud is so thick, it's not good for being a shepherd, for watching your sheep, but for thieves, better than night.
Yeah.
So this is prime time for people who have, who are deceptive and who have not great intentions to be about their business.
Yes. Yeah, so let's talk both, on the two levels. One, like, how is this simile a reflection of other things happening in this book? And then we'll back up even further to, like, the whole Iliad.
The interesting parallel to draw just in this chapter is that, right, we have this dust cloud, this fog here, and then when Paris is whisked away by Aphrodite, she puts a thick fog around everybody so they can't see. And so I like to think that this implies that whenever a god puts down a thick fog so no one can see, that means that some sort of deceptive, shifty, thief-like business is happening. Right. And this also comments on Paris's character. Like, he's someone who is gonna be it's cowardly type behavior.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because if we go back to that line we read where Hector's chastising him, we talked about that word womanizer, but the next word after that is like cheater or deceiver. Or so that's another insult that Hector levies against Paris is you're a liar,
Yeah. And not in a good way, right? So Odysseus, and we get more of this later, so we won't go into too much, but Odysseus does do deceiving things, but he does them in such a way that it's not cowardly and he doesn't get chastised for it. Instead, it's like his positive attribute. For Paris is definitely like a deceiver and a coward in a bad way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, right, like this kind of reflects this bigger question, maybe in all of warfare, but particularly in the Iliad, of the contrast between kind of like honor and shame, where like to fight honorably, right? Like so many of these warriors want to gain fame for themselves, to gain glory, to gain honor. And so that's a big deal of like fighting fair and square. And I think that often, right, like in all of these other duels that we're talking about, like there's often this contrast, right? Between the person who's more kind of sleazy versus the person who's more kind of just like straight up and like, I want to make this a fair fight.
Yeah, I do think it also comments on like the nature of glory though as well, because you can fight honorably and then die honorably on the battlefield, but if no one sees it, then maybe it's a bit of a waste. Right. So it's not just that you want to die on the battlefield, but you want to make sure everyone sees it. So that's kind of this comments on this notion of like heroic things happen in the bright sun and in the daylight.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so to back up even further, I think in many ways what you're articulating reflects a deep facet of human nature that like when we want to feel prideful about our actions, we need them to be seen by others. And we have this innate desire to like make our grand acts be so public because we want credit for them. We want fame, we want followers, we want, you know, our name on the children's library when we donate our money and things like that. As a framework that I'm trying to read this book with this time, that I think it's valuable for us, is to not separate ourselves from these characters and from these emotions, because it's easy to read this as old books about the past, about these sort of grand heroes that were bigger than life. There's these grand adventures and things like that. And so, you know, these people are different from me. But I think it's really important, at least for me in reading Homer, to recognize the ways in which their kind of like emotions and foibles and maybe heroism are still prevalent in all of us, that they're sort of human characteristics, not simply unique to, again, like the greatest warriors of mythology.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm really enjoying about the Iliad in particular right now is I think as modern people, it's really easy for us to think that we are like more evolved,
right?
And we are smarter, more sophisticated. Like
yes.
we wouldn't do war like this,
right?
But we still do, and we still have these. Our emotions might be more like muted. Daily life kind of makes us mute these very bombastic emotions, I think, but they're all still there. We do have these same really big, you know, rage-like emotions and these crazy desires, and we have this like hunger for specific things, and so that's at least what it brings out in me. Is it reminds me that I have these big things.
Yeah. And like when we meet somebody who acts like Paris, we look down on them and we sort of criticize them in those same ways. Yeah. Like the characters themselves are still these like archetypes of people that we might know again in pop culture, but also in our lives. And we recognize this kind of behavior, the trickiness of the like, oh, I'm so courageous. Actually, I'm just a coward. Oh, I'm going to fight, but then I'm going to run away and my little God is going to protect me. Like we, I think, properly detest that. And we see that as like dishonorable. Mm-hmm. And it helps us recognize that quality as bad.
Although you do raise a question that we can maybe discuss as we go through the whole book, but I don't really know who I'm supposed to be.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know which character in the narrative, that the narrative is saying, be like this person. Mm-hmm. Because when Achilles comes back into the story, it's impossible to be Achilles. Only Achilles can be Achilles. Mm-hmm. So who am I supposed to be?
Yeah, and I think it's also worth wondering, did Homer want us to identify with one person? Because I think that might be a modern imposition of like, right,
True.
Oftentimes in modern storytelling, the author writes one character so that you see yourself as them. But I don't actually necessarily know if Homer was trying like that, if that was a goal.
Yeah. I don't have specific places in the text to point now, but through Homeric simile, it could be argued that he was trying to make people identify with the emotions of people they don't see themselves as being anything like.
Right.
So, like, there will be times where a Homeric simile will compare the grief of a warrior to the grief of a mother.
Right.
And so I think that, and vice versa sometimes, mm-hmm. the warrior who listens to this realizes, oh, that emotion that I experience is the same mm-hmm. that a woman experiences in this context, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so it actually serves to make people identify with people like not of their demographic.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is something that I think is true of all literature, but I think especially of older literature, is it's easy. And this was, again, like, if I'll critique my teenage self. One of the reasons I hated Shakespeare was because like every famous Shakespeare that we read always followed the courtly people. It was always following the princes and the generals and the kind of like the elites. And I was like, but I can't identify with that. Like, that's not me. I'm never going to be in that position of power, or the stakes. My stakes in my life are never going to be that high, right? Like in this war, like at least for the foreseeable future, like my life isn't this grand. I don't act in such a way that like my life is on the line and the fate of my city is on the line, like Hector. And yet, like the patterns with which they interact with their emotions in each other still ring true. We can actually only maybe see them and relate to them on the grand scale. And that's why actually we need stories to follow these grand people, because they have to be exaggerated in order for me to recognize them in myself.
But I think that also comments on how like the things that motivate people kind of remain the same. The things that motivated people back then to do what they did, or we have the same motivations now to do what we do. And the things that cause people to falter back then are the same things that cause us to not succeed.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, like lust is still a problem in the modern day. It plagued Paris and it plagues many people.
Like our problems are all the same as well. They can all be tied back to like the same general impulses.
All right. So that will wrap up our conversation about book 3. If you would like to prepare for next week's episode about book 4, I am recording again an audiobook of Samuel Butler's translation. You are welcome to listen along on YouTube. We also have the full text available with that video if you want to read it and listen at the same time.
Yes. Last episode, I had hinted that we would maybe be posting the audio only of these audiobooks, maybe on a separate podcast feed. And we ran into some technical difficulties. We're not going to be able to make that happen. So for now, the audiobooks will only be available in one place, and that is on the YouTube channel linked below.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we are excited to keep going with this. I've gotten some great feedback from friends who are excited to listen along.
Yeah.
And we're glad to have you with us. See you next week.
Happy reading.